Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we'll be starting with part 1 of obstetrics rapid revision, and the most important topic that we'll begin with is labor, right? So let us start with normal labor. We will study it into three topics: passenger, passage, and the push. So starting with the passenger, that is the fetus. First, let us talk about lie. What is lie? It is the long axis of the fetus with a centralized uterus, which is very important, right? The most common lie is a longitudinal lie. This is a longitudinal lie, and the other lie can be either an oblique lie, right, or a transverse lie. Right. If there is a transverse lie, then we go in for C-section, and if antenatally we come across transverse lie, then we can also go in for external cephalic version. Next is presentation. The most common presentation is cephalic, right? And any other presentation apart from cephalic would be called a malpresentation. What is the most common malpresentation? It is breech. In transverse lie, the malpresentation or the presenting part would be a shoulder. So let us look at this diagram. Here we can see the uterus, and this is the lie of the fetus. Will it be oblique? No. Why? Because the uterus is not centralized here. If we centralize the uterus, right, we will see that the long axis of the fetus is aligning with the long axis of the centralized uterus. Hence, this will be a longitudinal lie. And if the fetus is oblique, the axis of fetus is oblique to the axis of the uterus, then only we will call it an oblique lie. Very important is to look at the centralization of the uterus before telling about the lie. All right. So in transverse lie, we'll see uh, there will be maximum risk of cord prolapse. And although vaginal delivery is not done in transverse prolapse, if it is done by an untrained dye, then what we can see is that through the introitus, a hand or a cord would be seen coming out, which is hand prolapse, again associated with transverse labor. Another complication of transverse lie. Another complication of transverse lie would be obstructed labor. How we can diagnose obstructed labor? We'll see the formation of a bandal ring, acidotic breathing. There might be fetal distress as well. So either for a transverse, I'm so sorry, I don't know what's gotten with my tongue right now, but for transverse lie or obstructed labor, the management would be performing a cesarean section. All right. Then presenting part, it is first felt on per vaginal examination. Right. In cephalic presentation, the presenting part can either be vertex, brow, or face, which depends upon the flexion and extension of the head. What is vertex? So, vertex is the part between the anterior and the posterior fontanelle. Brow is between the anterior fontanelle and the superior orbital ridge or the blade of the nose. And face is the part between the superior orbital ridge and the chin. Right. So, normally the attitude of the fetal is flexed, right? If the head is fully flexed or partially flexed, which we call deflex, then the presenting part would be vertex. While if the head is in partial extension, how we will say that it is in partial extension? We look at the neck, and the neck it's straight here, right? So it will be a brow present. The presenting part would be brow. Now, what is the cause of brow and face presentation? It is due to the abnormal attitude of the baby, right? And if the baby is in full extension, like the neck is extended and the occiput would be near the back of the baby, then we say it is a face presentation. It is very important to differentiate between face and brow, right? So if this is the head, in brow presentation the neck would be straight, remember that, while in extended position, the neck will be hyperextended and the head would be towards the back of the baby. This is very important to differentiate between the two. Okay, now talking about the engaging diameter. In vertex position, the engaging diameter will be suboccipitobrachmatic if the baby is fully flexed, which is 9.5 centimeter, and it is the smallest AP diameter. While if the head is deflexed, then the engaging diameter would either be a suboccipitofrontal, which is 10 centimeter, or occipitofrontal, which is 11.5 centimeters. Right. In brow presentation, the engaging diameter would be mentovertical, which is 14 centimeter, and it is the largest AP diameter. For this condition, since the head will not be able to pass through the pelvis, hence the management would be C-section. In face, the diameter can be either submentopragmatic if the position is mento-anterior, or submento-vertical in mento-posterior position. For mento-posterior position, we need to go in for a C-section, but if the position is mento-anterior and the engaging diameter is submentopragmatic, then a trial of vaginal delivery can also be done. For the baby to pass through the head, the largest diameter should pass through the pelvic inlet, right? So when the transverse diameter, which is the biparietal diameter, it is 9.5 centimeter and it is the largest diameter, it has passed the inlet, we say that the head is engaged, right? While the since the transverse diameter is always fixed, it will be the biparietal diameter, but the anteroposterior diameter changes depending upon the attitude of the baby, right? For example, we saw that in a fully flexed head, uh, the engaging diameter was suboccipitobrachmatic, while in a deflexed head it was suboccipitofrontal or occipitofrontal, which is more than 9 centimeter. Now, very important that a partially deflexed head is the most common cause of non-engagement in a primate at term. All right. The other causes of non-engagement can be either an occipitoposterior position or CPD, that is cephalopelvic disproportionation. Then let us talk about fetal skull. So the skull has two diameters, anteroposterior and transverse. In anteroposterior, mentovertical is the largest diameter, it is 14 centimeters, and the second largest will be submentovertical or occipitofrontal, right? They are both 11.5 centimeter. In transverse, for transverse diameter, remember Miss Tina so pretty, that is in the increasing order of size. So the smallest transverse diameter would be a bimastoid diameter, and it is the smallest diameter overall as well. While the largest transverse diameter is biparietal diameter, but transverse diameter, remember, is always shorter than the AP diameter. So if they ask about the largest transverse diameter, the answer would be biparietal, sorry. And if they ask about the largest diameter of fetal skull, then the answer would be mentovertical. But if they ask about the smallest diameter, then it is bimastoid. Now let us talk about position. So it is the relation between the denominator, which is the bony part that is presenting, and the bony pelvis. So the pelvis is divided into 8 quadrants. The most common position is left occipitotransverse. Then we move in anti-clockwise manner. In a clockwise manner, which is the left occipito-anterior, direct occipito-anterior, right occipito-anterior, right occipito-posterior, right occipitotransverse, right occipito-posterior, direct occipito-posterior, and left occipito-posterior, which is the least common. Right. So position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are all normal positions, while the position number 6, 7, and 8, they are abnormal position, right? And they are the posterior positions. So most commonly the fetus would be in left occipitotransverse position, while direct occipito anterior position would be the most common position for delivery. Then the most common posterior position is right occipito-posterior. Right, remember this. The most common position is left occipito-transverse, which is an anterior position, and the most common posterior position would be right occipito-posterior. If the occipito-posterior, next step would be wait and watch, and it is most commonly associated with an android pelvis, because in android pelvis the antero-posterior diameter is more than the transverse diameter. But if it converts to deep transverse arrest, then we manage by performing a C-section, or with the help of vacuum, the head can also be rotated. For rotating the head, we do not use forceps. Forceps are used when the head is rotated manually. Earlier, Keelan forceps was used, which was a rotational forceps, but now it is not being used. We used vacuum for rotation of the head, but preferred is always C-section. Then in case of, if the question says deep occipito-posterior, percent occipito-posterior, or non-rotation of fetal head, then it is most commonly associated with anthropoid pelvis. Now, some question can be asked when they show you a diagram and ask about the position. So remember, this is always right and this side is left. So we look at the pubic symphysis. Diagonal fontanelle would be anterior and the triangular fontanelle would be posterior. So this is occiput, and the occiput is in the transverse position. So this is occipito-transverse left. So the position would be left occipito-transverse, right? This is a very easy question. We should not get it wrong. Now, what happens is that the baby is in the occiput is in left occipito-transverse position, but for delivery it has to come to the direct occipito-anterior position. For that it has to go rotation, which is called as internal rotation. So internal rotation takes place by 90 degrees, which is 2/8 of a circle, and it takes place at the level of ischial spine, which is station 0. Above ischial spine is negative station and below is positive station, right? Then at left occipito-transverse position, when the baby is at LOT, the shoulder will be at direct occipito-anterior position, because the angle between head and shoulders is 90 degree. But after internal rotation, the shoulder rotates by 45 degree, because the neck can bear a torsion of 45 degrees or 1/8 of a circle. So shoulder was in DOA and it moves to ROA position, while head moves from LOT to ROA. This is internal rotation, right? Remember, in direct occipito-posterior position, here phase 2 pubes delivery will take place, and it is most common with anthropoid pelvis, but there are more chances of perineal tear and PPH. Hence we go for prophylactic episiotomy to prevent any tear. Now let us briefly talk about the Leopold maneuvers, right? We will ask the patient to empty her bladder, and we will face the patient in the first 3 maneuvers, that is 1 to 3, and we will face the feet of the patient for the 4th maneuver. The first maneuver is the fundal grip. Here we come to know about the lie of the fetus. If the grip is empty, we say it is a transverse lie. If we can see soft broad part, that is the buttock, this means that the buttock is in the fundus and the head would be present below. So this is a cephalic presentation. While if we palpate a firm globular structure, which is the head in the fundus, this means that the lie would be breech. The second grip is the lateral grip. Here we come to know about the position of the baby, how we feel the back, and it is described as continuous part with a board-like rigidity. Right, if we see it on the left side, the position would be left occipito-anterior or left occipito-transverse, while on the right side, the position can be ROT and LOA. Third is the Pollock grip, in which we feel the part in the pelvis with one hand, and if we can feel the head, it confirms the cephalic position. Once the position is confirmed, we look for ballotability by moving our hands from side to side. If the head is not engaged, it will be ballotable and it will move freely. While if ballotability is absent, that means the head is fixed. It means that the head is engaged. Then talking about the last grip, here we face the patient's feet and both hands are kept parallel to the inguinal ligament like this. Alright, it is also known as deep pelvic grip for knowing the attitude of the baby. So if the fingers converge, that means the head is free, while if the fingers diverge, it means that the head is fixed. Now let us talk about the cardinal movement of labor. Right. So first is engagement, which is the passing of the greatest diameter at the inlet, which is the biparietal diameter, that is 9.5 centimeter. It takes place at 38 weeks in primary, and it takes place at the onset of labor in a multigravida. Second is descent and flexion of the fetus. It generally occurs simultaneously, second and third movement, and it occurs due to the recoil of levator ani muscle as the head descends, which leads to flexion of the head. Then fourth movement is internal rotation. It occurs at the level of ischial spine, and the baby moves through 90 degree, 45 degrees for neck and 45 degree for shoulder, through which the shoulder comes to right occipito anterior and head lies at the direct occipito anterior position. It is followed by extension, right? So this leads to the delivery of the head of the baby. Remember, in breech or face, the delivery of the head takes place by flexion. Then restitution, it is a part of extension. This is not a cardinal movement. Next movement is external rotation. So what happens is that shoulder is at RO A position and it has to come to DOA for delivery. So when the shoulder moves inside, we can see the head moving outside. That is called as external rotation. And finally, lateral flexion, that leads to delivery of the entire body of the baby, right? So we've talked about the passenger, that is the baby. Now let us talk about passage, which is the pelvis. So pelvis has diameter at the inlet, which is the antero-posterior diameter. It can be a true conjugate, obstetric conjugate, or a diagonal conjugate. The true conjugate is 11 centimeter, obstetric is 10 to 10.5, and DC or the diagonal conjugate is 12 centimeter, and it is the diameter that can be measured clinically. Then the oblique diameter, right? It is left oblique and right oblique. Left oblique is from left sacroiliac joint to iliopectineal eminence, and right would be from right sacroiliac joint. The oblique diameter is 12 centimeter and the transverse diameter at the inlet is 13 centimeter, right? Then mid cavity, the diameter is 12 centimeter and it is called the plane of great pelvic dimension. It is at the level of ischial spine. Okay, then outlet is divided into obstetric outlet, which has a diameter of 11 centimeter and it is called the plane of least pelvic dimension. And the anatomical outlet, it measures 11.5 to 13 centimeter, and the transverse diameter at anatomical outlet is at the ischial tuberosity and it is called the bituberous diameter, which is also 11 centimeters. Okay, now when we will call a contracted pelvis, when the inlet diameter, that is the obstetric conjugate, is less than 10 centimeter, how we'll calculate it by subtracting 2 from the diagonal conjugate. Then the diameter of the cavity or the interischial diameter is less than 8 centimeter, or the bituberous diameter at the outlet is less than 8 centimeter. So this is a definition of a contracted pelvis, and the management for contracted pelvis is C-section. Now the variations of contracted pelvis are Naegeli's pelvis, where one ala is absent, Robert's pelvis, where both ala are absent, and osteomyelitic pelvis, that is a triradiate inlet, rachitic pelvis having a renal or reniform inlet. Then we classify pelvis according to the Caldwell-Molloy classification and divided into gynecoid pelvis, where the transverse diameter is more and the walls are broad and parallel to each other. In android pelvis, the inlet has a heart-shaped cavity, and here the ischial spines are prominent. The lateral walls are converging. It is associated with deep transverse arrest and occipito-posterior position. Here remember that the subpubic angle is acute, while in gynecoid the subpubic angle is obtuse. Anthropoid pelvis, here the AP diameter is more than the transverse diameter, so the lateral walls will be parallel but they are narrow. Right, it is associated with persistent occipito-posterior, direct occipito-posterior, and face to pubes delivery. Then finally, rare type is platyploid pelvis. It is a flat pelvis. Here, the lateral walls are diverging, and it is the least common. Now, finally, we've talked about the passenger fetus and the passage, which is the pelvis. So we'll talk about push. So the pain of labor is typically felt at T10 to L1. Right, it originates from the cornua to the lower uterine segment at the rate of 2 centimeter per second. This is very important. An adequate uterine contraction is defined as 3 contractions in 10 minutes lasting for 45 seconds. Any increase which increases the intrauterine pressure to 65 to 75 mmHg, and in Montevideo unit it is 200 to 220 Montevideo units. What is tachysystole? It is defined as more than 5 contractions in 10 minutes and it will lead to fetal distress. Right. In first stage of labor, the intrauterine pressure is 40 to 50 mm of Hg, while in second and third it should be 100 to 120 mm of Hg. Now, if the contraction is inadequate, how will we manage? First, we will for management we will do augmentation of labor, which is increasing the frequency, and it can be done by ARM, which leads to artificial rupture of membrane, which leads to release of PGE2 that increases the contraction. If it is not happening, then we give oxytocin, which is the drug of choice, after 30 to 60 minutes. Right, we give it in the dose of 5 international units and we dilute it in 500 ml ms, and the rate should be 8 drops per minute. Remember, 16 drops per minute is 1 ml, so a maximum of 4 ml per minute can be given. Then the indications for augmentation are uterine inertia and protracted active phase of labor. What is precipitate labor? If the labor is very fast and it happens within 3 hours, it is called as precipitate labor, and there is more than 5 centimeter dilatation of cervix in 1 hour. Why it is detrimental is that it can lead to postpartum hemorrhage and perineal tears. Hence, very important, this was asked in INICT this year as well. How do we prevent it? The WHO guidelines. First, perineal support is provided. Second, prevent premature extension of head, that is the head should be flexed. Third, deliver between uterine contraction. And fourth, the routine episiotomy is not advised. Right, this was asked in AIIMS. Now talking about perineal tears, they can be divided into primary tear where the vaginal mucosa is torn, secondary tear where vaginal mucosa and muscle is torn. Tertiary tear is defined as the involvement of sphincter where A is less than 50% of external anal sphincter involved, B is more than 50%, and C is both internal and external sphincter involvement, while fourth is the involvement of rectal mucosa. Tertiary and quaternary tears are major tears and they are managed in OT under general anesthesia. Now contractions, they should be measured every 30 minutes by placing the hand of the uterus for 10 minutes. Right, on partogram, one box will be for one contraction. So if there are 3 contractions, then we will plot 3 box, and depending upon the duration, if it is less than 20 seconds, we will put dots. If it is between 20 to 40, we'll draw lines, and if it is more than 40 seconds, we'll do a solid coloring of the box. Right. Then constriction ring or Schroeder ring, it is due to incoordinated uterine contraction, right, which is ineffective and injudicious use of oxytocin. It is a ring formed between upper uterine segment and lower uterine segment. It is nothing but a localized spasm of the uterus at the internal os. Right. So how will we differentiate it from Bandel's ring? So Bandel rings is a pathological ring. Here the upper uterine segment would be tense and the lower uterine segment will be relaxed. While in Schroeder's ring, the upper uterine segment will not be that tense and LUS will also be normal. Second, a Bandel's ring can be felt per abdominally, while Schroeder's ring can only be felt when we do a per vaginal examination. The Bandel's ring lead to obstructed labor and fetal distress, while in Schroeder's ring there will be prolonged labor. There won't be any fetal distress present, And the management for Bandel's ring is C-section, while in shoulder's ring, we wait and watch and sedate the patient. But if the ring reappears, then only we go for C-section. So this completes our normal labor.